نحمده ونصلي ونسلم على سيدنا ونبينا وحبيبنا وشفيعنا ومولانا محمد صلى الله تعالى عليه وسلم رسوله النبي الأمين المكين الحنين الكريم الرؤوف الرحيم. أما بعد فأعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. قال الله تعالى في شأن حبيبه إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما. اللهم صل وسلم على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا محمد كما تحب وترضى بأن تصلي عليه. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. قل أعوذ برب الفلق من شر ما خلق ومن شر غاسق إذا وقب ومن شر النفاثات في العقد ومن شر حاسد إذا حسد. صدق الله العظيم وبلغنا رسوله النبي الكريم ونحن على ذلك لمن الشاهدين والشاكرين والحمد لله رب العالمين. Most respected ulama, my respected elders, brothers and sisters in Islam, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh. Alhamdulillah, we praise Almighty Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We have gathered here on this best Yawm Jumu'ah. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept our presence here this afternoon. May He accept whatever we do sincerely for His sake, inshallah ta'ala. Some good news for all of you. The baby moon has been born. So by tomorrow morning at 8:24, the baby moon will be 24 hours, right? And plus minus 35, 36 hours. Full action, inshallah. Last week, I commenced the discussion in terms of the Quranic archetypes of toxic people, which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has discussed in Surah Al-Hujurat. And amongst the archetypes, there are 7 fundamental archetypes which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has spoken of and classified in the Holy Quran, and that these people who possess these qualities are toxic to themselves and are toxic to others. And in terms of psychology, modern psychology, and obviously preceding the Quranic psychology, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has classified them in no particular order. Quran says, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu la yaskhar qawmun min qawmin asa an yakunu khayran minhum ila akhir al-ayah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaks about the archetype in terms of a narcissist. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaks about the sociopath, the psychopath amongst them. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaks about the chronic pessimist, or what we would call the persistent critic, right? Or for that matter, that person who's a serial gossip, right? And other qualities as well. And the one who's the conspiracy theorist, so to speak, and the one who's overcome by anxiety and suspicions and doubts, right? The serial warrior, as you would call it. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that these people themselves are toxic, and they are toxic with regards to others as well. But there are certain tendencies, certain desires, and certain habits that we ourselves engage in that make us firstly toxic to ourselves and toxic in terms of our relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right? Toxic people, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given you the archetypes. But one of the things that we ourselves are engaging in, wherein we are ourselves taking in the poison, right, and poisoning ourselves. And these are the things that we need to worry about, because we can deal with the narcissist, we can deal with the sociopath, we can deal with the psychopath, we can deal with the serial, the chronic, pessimist, whatever it is. But there are certain tendencies, certain habits, certain desires in us, which, if we engage in regularly, can be equally toxic and, more importantly, destructive in terms of our spiritual and moral fabric, and eventually in terms of our spiritual attainment, in terms of our relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now, I don't go into detail with regards to the discussion, but I'm just going to give you a classification of some of the toxic tendencies, desires, and habits that are what we would call, if we engage in them, are self-destructive. And we literally feeding ourselves poison, inshallah. Now, you and I understand that in terms of our lifestyle, right, doctors will classify for you what they call lifestyle diseases. Right? Excessive eating and this and that can lead to diabetes, right? Your lifestyle in terms of lack of exercise, etc., right? Can lead to heart disease. smoking, etc. These are all lifestyle diseases which are very, very injurious to the body. Likewise, spiritual lifestyles, right, which are injurious, which are destructive to our spiritual state, are also called spiritual lifestyle diseases. Now, in terms of what the Holy Quran has guided us regarding these toxic desires, tendencies, and habits, and the Prophet ﷺ has elucidated for us, we can basically categorize them into basically 10 qualities. 2 of them, which are toxic for us, right, in terms of our own personal development, are physical qualities. These are toxic tendencies and habits and desires in us, and they are related to the physical body. And Imam al-Ghazali, one of the great, if not the greatest spiritual psychologist of Islam, has referred to it as shahwatayn. These 2 qualities are shahwatayn, the 2 unbridled desires. And what are they? Lust and gluttony. The desire for sexual fulfillment and the desire to fill the stomach. So he calls them shahwatayn, the 2 unbridled desires. And if these things are not kept in check, lust and gluttony, they are a cause of not even a slow, but a very quick poison of your spiritual condition and ultimately also your physical state. I'm going to classify them and I'll go into detail after that. So that one is physical. The second one is what we would refer to as something which is mental and emotional. And that is our inability to keep our emotions in check and maintain a mental and emotional equilibrium. So it's a mental condition. And the highest ranking in terms of the most toxic of qualities regarding, an unbalanced emotional and mental state is when a person is very prone to anger. Ghadab. Okay? Ghadab. So this is what we call a mental and an emotional state. Then you have, and this is a very interesting one, then you have what we would call a social condition. A social state wherein a person becomes toxic in terms of his or her interaction with people and his or her dealings with people and the consequence of their dealings and interaction with people. That's why I call it a social toxic condition. And you know what that is? And in my opinion, it's the most toxic of all of the toxic qualities that we are, induce in ourselves. And that is a condition which is called envy, hasad. Hasad, right? And what precedes hasad is something which is called, Quran speaks of al-hakumut takathur, gross rivalry and competition for the dunya, leads to this ultimate disease which is called hasad, right? Then the scholars like Imam Muhammad al-Ghazali and Ibn Qayyim al-Jawziyah and so on have given some subcategories in terms of all of this. And they say there are 4 poisons of the heart, right? Which are all related to what I just discussed to you. Amongst them, like we said, is in terms of lust, it's the unrestrained glance. So what causes the lust in you to increase even more is the unrestrained glance. Now if you look at it today, right, men have a tendency that they will look or they will want to look at that which they are not supposed to look at. Instead of lowering their gaze, they want to raise their gaze. And the glance becomes an unrestrained one. And in this modern day, in the digital age, the unrestrained glance is whereby pornography is easily accessible to everybody. Right? You can go through hundreds, thousands of these images, right, which are being transmitted and transferred into you, right, which will again increase the desire and the lust that is in you, which will destroy you. And then we speak about excessive talk and bad company. Social interaction, because the more you talk, the more bad company you keep, right? The more this type of envy and these qualities are created in you. And then the final quality is one which is called ideological, which the Prophet ﷺ has spoken as referred to as nifaq, hypocrisy, and it is an outcome of an unbalanced spiritual state. Why is it unbalanced? Quran says, right? وإذا إن المنافقين يخادعون الله وخادعهم وإذا قاموا إلى الصلاة قاموا يراؤون الناس ولا يذكرون الله إلا قليلا. Unbalanced, لا إله هؤلاء ولا إله هؤلاء. They're neither this side nor are they that side. They are in an unbalanced spiritual state. They haven't entered into Islam completely. And the consequence of that is not when you're just hiding what your beliefs are, but how you speak, right? How you fulfill your tasks, right? Whether you keep the promises that you have made, how you react when people are nasty towards you, etc., etc. So it manifests in your character as well. So it affects not only your iman, but it affects your akhlaq as well. These are fundamentally some of the toxic qualities that you and I are constantly taking very dangerous doses of daily. Now, many of us take some tablets in the morning. Either it's a vitamin tablet or it's a tablet for this or that, whatever it is there. In terms of making, so for cholesterol, you're going to take it, or if you've got an allergy, you take it. You take for your diabetes, you take for your thyroid issues. Daily tablets you take inside it. On a daily basis, you and I are also consuming toxic, right, things which are destroying our body and our spiritual condition. And this is what the Holy Prophet ﷺ has stated. Now I want to start off with the most difficult one first. And that is hasad, which is a social vice. Because whatever I spoke about yesterday, last week, which was in terms of the archetypes, all of them, if you look at the foundation of all of these qualities and these tendencies and these archetypes, like the narcissist, the sociopath, the psychopath, the serial gossip and so on there, what are all of these? These are social ills. And the basis of one, the foundation of all of this is based on hasad, or what we call envy. And this quality of envy, this negative quality of envy, has been discussed by philosophers for a long time. I like Aristotle and his description of what envy is. And he's written in his rhetoric, he said, envy is pain and irritation, I'm using the word, and irritation and anger at the good fortune of others. When you see other people thrive, when you see other people successful, when you see other people happy, and when you see them, having a good life, if you find pain at their good fortune, that is envy. But not finished yet. And it is also to feel pleasure and satisfaction in the misfortune of others. So when you saw a person who's successful, who's doing well, and all of a sudden things went bad, hey, he deserved it. Good. His business went down. Right? Oh, he got sick. I hope he drops dead. Envy. Well, out of all the ones, I want to concentrate on this one here more than anything else. Because this is the one which is the basis of all of these social evils that seems to be, gluttony, this one, we can still deal with. But when it comes to envy, right, envy consumes you from within. And the Holy Prophet ﷺ, he said, إِيَّاكُمْ وَالْحَسَدِ. He said, avoid envy. Why? فَإِنَّ الْحَسَدَ يَأْكُلُ حَسَنَاتٍ كَمَا تَأْكُلُ النَّارُ الْحَطَبَ. He said, avoid envy, for envy devours good deeds, all the good action that you've done, just as fire devours fuel, or he said grass. Like fire devours wood, right? Or grass. Now quickly the fire will destroy the grass. The Holy Prophet ﷺ said, all your amal, your salats, your nawafi, your acts of charity and everything inside it, he said, nothing consumes all your good deeds quicker, faster, and more destructively than envy. You know and I know. Right? If you set a fire here, we just dry grass. In a matter of minutes, a large portion of the area will just catch fire. How long it took for the grass to grow? How long it took for you to acquire those good deeds? Months, years. And how was it destroyed? In one fire. And what was the fire? The fire that consumes you from within. نَارُ اللَّهِ مُوقَدَةً الَّتِي تَطَّلِعُ عَلَى الْأَفْئِدَةِ. That envy. And the Holy Prophet says, it consumes your deeds. So here, we are talking about, when you're consuming the flesh of your dead brother, when you're engaging in gossip, you consume the flesh of your dead brother in gossip, but envy consumed you from the inside. And trust me when I tell you, one of the scholars of Islam, he said, I think it was, let me see if I can find this quotation of his head. One of the scholars of Islam, Wahab, he said, قال خلقت في الحكمة للكفر أربعة أركان. Wahab radiallahu ta'ala, right? He says, I read in the books of wisdom that the pillars of unbelief are four. The pillars of unbelief are four. He said, one is the pillar of anger. The second is the pillar of lust. The third is the pillar of greed. And the fourth is the pillar of fear. If you take greed and fear and you combine them together, what is created is called envy. So, the most destructive of all of them, this is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said in the Holy Quran, قُلْ أَعُوذُ بِرَبِّ الْفَلَقِ. And we know the side. وَمِنْ شَرِّ حَاسِدٍ إِذَا حَسَدٍ. If a shar, which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has specified in particular in the Holy Quran, for us to seek refuge from, in engaging in, and from being a target of or a victim of, is the shar of the hasid, of the envier, when he envies. Because not only is he harming the person that he envies, but he is ultimately and most importantly harming himself. Okay? One. Number two, what is the basis of all of this? What is the basis of this envy that consumes us? The Holy Prophet ﷺ gave a hadith, it's one of the most scariest of hadiths, which I constantly remind myself and remind others of. And it's narrated in the Jami of Imam al-Tirmidhi, but the explanation given, a little bit more extension of an explanation in Tabarani and Mu'jam al-Awsat is a very interesting one. And again, the very basis of envy, right? What is it? Al-Hakum al-Takathur, gross rivalry and competition for dunya, virtue. The Holy Prophet ﷺ said, Ma dhikban, ضاريان جائعان باتا في زريبة غنم أغفلها أهلها يفترسان ويأكلان بأسرع فيها فسادا من حب المال والشرف في دين المرء المسلم. صدق رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم. Now look at the description of the Prophet of Allah with regards to those two tendencies in us and two desires in us that ultimately create what is known as envy. And how destructive they are. Look at his description of it. He said, the Holy Prophet said, two ravenous. You know what's ravenous? You know, like hungry. Like, you are hungry and you want it by you. Two ravenous, hungry wolves spending the night in a pen of sheep, while the owners of the sheep are negligent and unaware that the ravenous wolves are there. Right? Bloodthirsty and eating, are not quicker to wreak havoc than the havoc that is caused by a person's love of wealth and high status. Now imagine the scene. The Prophet of Allah gave you a scene. Imagine two hungry wolves in a pen of sheep. When the wolves are fast asleep, they don't know that the wolves are inside the pen. Right? What will those wolves do to the sheep? They're going to rip them apart. They're going to rip them apart. And the Prophet of Allah, he said, those two wolves don't cause that much destruction as the love of wealth and status destroys the condition, the spiritual condition of a Muslim. Allahu Akbar. Show me a person, many of us, there are a few exceptions, Allahu Alam. Allah make us one of them, inshallah. Right? Who doesn't have a love for wealth. If the love for wealth is not so great, then sometimes the love for status is even greater. Or sometimes, they don't worry about the status as long as I got the money. But what did the Prophet of Allah say? There's nothing more destructive than, in terms of our spiritual condition, than the love of wealth and the desire for high status. And if we are deprived of wealth, and if we are deprived of status, nothing makes us more envious of others than those people who have wealth and those who have the status. Everybody says, I wish I had that. Why does he have to have it? Why can't I have it? Why can't I have the status? Why can't I have that name? Why can't I have that fame? How many of us can truly, genuinely say that, no, alhamdulillah, I have some degree of immunity from these things? Quran says there's a human proclivity to it. وَإِنَّهُ لِحُبِّ الْخَيْرِ لَشَدِيدٌ. And he's intense, right, in his love for wealth. There's our tendency. And high status, name and fame. Now, what is interesting about envy and why it is so dangerous? Let me get back to the envy story. You see, the other toxic qualities, like the physical ones, lust and gluttony, there's some pleasure attached to it. Khana khaya maza. What a top biryani. What a top fish curry. What a top don. I know everybody is making final don and rice before, hey, maza. Right? You got some pleasure out of it. Right? If you have a desire for lust and you fulfill your lust, so by some pleasure attached. But you know what? In the condition of envy, there is no pleasure derived out of it. Even when you are pleased at the misfortune of another, there is no pleasure that comes out of it. There is anger inside. It manifests in the form of anger. It manifests in the form of rancor. It manifests in the form of maliciousness. Even if you saw bloody rubbish, die, you didn't say, wow, you don't dance a jig. It's still a negative feeling in you. Whether it is maliciousness, whether it is spite, whether it is revenge, but it's all negative. You don't feel happy about it. The only feelings that come out from there are negative feelings of resentment, anger, and so on. So envy gives you no pleasure at all as well. Lust will still give you something. Gluttony will still give you something, but envy completely poisons you. Okay, now, one of them, and I'm going to speak about anger right now. The Holy Prophet ﷺ spoke about anger. Now, you know and I know that we all have a tendency and proclivity. It's part of our nature. Right? But the Holy Prophet ﷺ, realizing the condition of the anger that we have, the Holy Prophet ﷺ spoke about the beauty of a person who is enabled and empowers himself to control his anger. And the Holy Prophet ﷺ said, مَا مِنْ جُرْعَةٍ أَعْظَمُ أَجْرًا عِنْدَ اللَّهِ مِنْ جُرْعَةِ غَيْرٍ كَظَمَهَا عَبْدًا ابْتِغَاءَ وَجْهِ اللَّهِ. We underestimate the negative impact of anger on us. On a daily basis, right, we have short spurts of anger, or we have an extended state of anger, or we have a prolonged state when the anger keeps on like simmering, right, for hours and days and months on end. It's a human tendency but needs to be controlled. And the Holy Prophet ﷺ is telling you the reward for a person who can control and manage his emotions. For what reason? For his own self-development. If he directs his desire to control his anger, seeking the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the Holy Prophet ﷺ has said in the hadith, which is Sahih Hadith Manner, there is nothing swallowed. When we talk about consumption, the best thing you can swallow is not a glass of water. The best thing that you can swallow is not one fancy biryani. The Prophet of Allah is telling that there is nothing swallowed with a greater reward from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala than a servant who swallows his rage. Not even sweet cold water is more pleasurable in the sight of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala than a person who has the ability to swallow his rage. You know, they say, swallow your anger, but one scholar said, and digest it. Don't say, no, I swallow my anger, but that means stuck there. It's stuck there. Right? What's going to happen? You're going to get anger indigestion. Not necessarily indigestion. You're going to get anger indigestion. They say, swallow your anger and then digest it. Yeah, right, let it go inside. Just take over the pizza, let it go in. Swallow your anger, the scotch there, and digest it. Don't let it simmer there. That's what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said. And why? Why does he swallow his rage? Seeking the countenance of Allah. Only for the sake of Allah. I'll bring my anger down. You see how spiritual remedies are granted by Allah. There are certain qualities in us or certain tendencies in us that really we can't really completely change. But the spiritual transformation that comes in terms of being able to control the anger is with a higher religious and spiritual ideal. And that is, I'm seeking the pleasure of Allah. Really, let me tell you something, there is no greater motivation for a person to swallow his anger than seeking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's reward, his countenance. Why? Because you have a position in anger, but you want to, not the same, Latvia, or whatever they say. But seeing the countenance of Allah, there's one hadith, and just of the hadith, the Holy Prophet said, whosoever swallows, this is just of a hadith, whosoever swallows his anger, particularly in a condition wherein he could have retaliated and he had the power to retaliate, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will present him on the day of Qiyamah and declare that this is one of those people, right, who swallowed his anger when he was in a position to retaliate, and Allah will say, now choose any guru you want. How many people are going to talk about that now? I mean, you've got to give incentive to. Some people may not be able to reach that spiritual level of seeing the countenance of Allah. I hope you understood that, right? may not be able to reach the spiritual level of seeing the counsel of Allah, but if you give them another incentive, why? Huri is there. Oh, you're not bad. What then? Allah will say, choose any huri you want. So in accordance to your spiritual status and your spiritual elevation and your spiritual refinement, Allah said, okay, that's fine. If you can't reach iqtiqa wajhillah, chalo, let me give you the lalach, like the things are there. Okay, look, see, I'm sweetening the deal for you, one huri for you. I'll declare to everybody. Why is Allah doing this? Why is Rasulullah telling you this? Because he knows, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, how destructive this quality can be in you. And these things are things which are poisoning us on a daily basis. Then very quickly, the ideological one. The Holy Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, he said, أَرْبَعٌ مَنْ كُنَّ فِي كَانَ مُنَافِقًا خَالِصًا. He said, whosoever has the following 4 characteristics will be a pure hypocrite. Pure hypocrite. You know what he's telling you? He said, hey, right? And he said, what he said? He says, منهن كان في خصلة من النفاق حتى يدعاها إذا اؤتمن خان وإذا حدث كذب وإذا عاهد غدر وإذا خاصم فجر. The Holy Prophet said, he says he will continue having this following 4 characteristics as a pure hypocrite until he gets rid of them and he gives it up. He said, what is it? Whenever he is entrusted, he betrays the trust. He is not a person of amana. You can't trust him. Number 1. Number 2, when he speaks, he tells a lie. He's a pathological liar. Number 3, when he makes a covenant, or either ahada, he proves treacherous. Covenant means, a legal document, when you sign an agreement, basically, I'm giving an example. He proves treacherous. They won't stick to the legal agreement. They won't stick to the contract that they have made up. They won't break the contract. And then the Prophet said, when he quarrels and when he engages in a manner where he's quarreling something, he behaves in a very imprudent, evil, and insulting manner. He'll swear. He'll behave in an evil manner. Right? He'll be imprudent. He will call you names. Ma binti gaya. And what did the Prophet of Allah say? He's a munafiq. And what precedes that? Why? When he's performing his salah, right? He just gives for people must see. He's got no heart attached to it. What's the consequence of this? His tongue never comes right. His heart never comes right. His ability to promise and maintain his trust never come right. Okay? I don't have the time to cover the rest of it there, but these are major, serious, toxic tendencies, characteristics, and habits in us. How do we get rid of them? Books have been written. About this thing. How to get rid of this habit, whether it's hasad, whether it is ghadab, whether it is shahwa, right? Whether it is nifaq. Books have been written on it. But you know what? All of these, or the vast majority of these negative, toxic qualities, has one broad spectrum antibiotic, which is the basis of your spiritual treatment. And you know what that is? Shock of shockers. Siyam, fasting. Last, Allah said, Band kar do, morning till evening. Close it, keep yourself under control. Gluttony, start before sunrise till sunset. Fast. Ghadab. The Holy Prophet ﷺ said in the hadith of the Holy Prophet ﷺ, the Holy Prophet ﷺ said, he said, As-siyamu junnah. Siyam is the detox. As-siyamu junnah. إِذَا كَانَ أَحَدُكُمْ صَائِمًا فَلَا يَرْفُثْ وَلَا يَجْهَلْ. He said, when any of you is fasting, you should neither behave in an obscene manner, what do hypocrites do? Okay? Or, nor should he behave foolishly. If a man fights or abuses him and makes him angry, he should say, I am fasting. Gluttony. The Holy Prophet said, he said, there is no vessel, there is no worse vessel. Right? The Holy Prophet said, the Holy Prophet said, he said, a human being has never filled any vessel that is worse than the stomach. Gluttony. And how do you resolve the problem of gluttony? Allah said, you fast. How do you resolve that? The Holy Prophet told you, he says, if you guarantee me those 2 things, right? One is between your jaws and one is between your loins. That is, the jaws is your tongue, and between your loins is your private part. The Prophet of Allah said, I will guarantee you Jannah. And the control of both, Rasulullah said, the antibiotic for it is in a state of siyam. The Holy Prophet said, مَنْ لَمْ يَدَعْ قَوْلَ الزُّورِ وَالْعَمَلَ بِهِ فَلَيْسَ لِلَّهِ حَاجَةٌ أَنْ يَضَعَ طَعَامَهُ وَشَرَابَهُ. Speaking of the spiritual dimension of fasting, the Prophet of Allah said, whosoever does not give up false talk and acting upon it, right? Allah is in no need of him abstaining from food and drink. So your excessive talk, your gluttony, your lust, your anger, right? Your hypocrisy. من قام ليلة القدر I can't remember exact words like that. إيمانا واحتسابا, right? With a state of iman, hopeful for reward, with sincerity. غفر الله ما تقدم من ذنبه كما قال عليه الصلاة والسلام. Right? Allah will forgive you sin. Allah is telling you here, if you want to get rid of hypocrisy, stand there with iman and ihtisab, hopeful for reward. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said that toxicity will come out from you. And most importantly, physical detox, Allah said empty the stomach. You saw, so many of these spiritual poisons that poison us daily. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, if you engage in a detox for 29 to 30 days, in the state of this month of Ramadan Mubarak, these toxic qualities that poison you for 11 months will be a state of detox for you. And ultimately, if you can catch that spiritual moment, right, it will actually accelerate your spiritual development by 84 years of effort. See? Okay, time is up. Allah grant us Soofie and Hidayah, inshallah ta'ala. As we said, the baby moon was born this morning, right? Hopefully, inshallah ta'ala, we'll have a viewing, baby viewing, by tomorrow evening, inshallah ta'ala. Baby viewing today is out of the question, unless, of course, you're in Saudi. They have exclusive access, VIP access to inshallah ta'ala. But Ramadan Kareem for all of you, inshallah ta'ala. In terms of our programs, right, for the first few days, or maybe 10 days of Ramadan Mubarak, Isha Adhan will be at 7:15, which will be followed by a short talk, which we normally do, and Salah will be at 7:30. Right? 7:15 Adhan, 7:30 Jamaat for the first 10 days or so, and then Taraweeh will be performed obviously, inshallah ta'ala. And as normal, we'll have we're going back to now basically normal in terms of post-COVID. We'll have our refreshments outside as well, inside, in terms of our tea, chai stalls and whatever it is, inshallah ta'ala. Number one. Number two, all of the nights of Taraweeh and Laylatul Qadr and the on nights and so on there, every single night there are facilities available for our mothers and our children and so on there. Please bring your families, bring your children and engage in all of these activities. Iftar is open here for our people as well. With your children, with your daughters, we need to create that sense of community which has been lost by virtue of social distancing. We need to become now engaged in spiritual closeness as opposed to social distance, inshallah ta'ala. Fajr Salah is at the current time, which is 5 o'clock Adhan and 5:15 Jama'ah, and the Asr time has also changed. And so please, the last 10 nights we'll have our Salatul Tasbih programs and everything, inshallah ta'ala. So please, we hope that inshallah, wherever you are, and I'm sending this message out because lots of our businessmen have now found it convenient not to engage in Salatul Jum'ah in a masjid. They're doing it in factories and offices. You are losing the entire social and spiritual value of what Jum'ah is. Come back to the masajid. Come back to the masajid. Watching things on YouTube, right, doesn't guarantee malaika descending on you in your house. The nuzul of malaika and sakina and rahmah is in the assembly of dhikr, not through your digital transmission on YouTube. Okay? So please, come back to the masjid, inshallah. May Allah make it a successful Ramadan. May Allah accept our siyam, our qiyam, and all our, وتمم تقصيرنا يا الله يا رحمن يا حنان يا رب. وصلى الله على سيدنا ومولانا محمد وعلى اله وصحبه اجمعين.